Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Debbie Kalaki, the Senior Consultant for PRC, Practical Resources for Churches. Our presenter tonight is Karen Ware Jackson, an editor of When Kids Ask Hard Questions, Faith-Filled Responses for Tough Topics. And that book is coming out October 8th from Chalice Press. As a pastor and parent of two school-aged kids, she's had her share of hard questions and hopefully faithful conversations. She blogs about parenting and engaging all ages in worship at www.karenwarejackson.com. Karen, welcome.
It's my pleasure to be with all of you tonight. You might see a little window that says Jake Jackson. That's my son, Jake. He is 6 years old and he's going to join us. We have a little thing we're going to do at the end. So you might see his little bespectacled face appear in that window. But I want to start with actually a question that he lobbed at me just last week while we were sitting down doing homework on a Tuesday night. And he said to me, "Mommy, why do they call my skin white? It's not white. It's like peachy." And I had to have this moment with my 6-year-old son where in the middle of everything else that was going on, he asked me a question that was about race. It's about the way that we treat other people. It's about extremes. He, as a child that is white, he also is male. He's young, but he bears a lot of markers within him, as we all do. And we had to have this moment where we talked first about the why we might say something, take something that is lighter and go all the way to say it's white, even though it's not really white. And so skin that we often will call black is not really black, it's brown, some shades of brown, and you know the differences in that and why it's important to be clear. We talked about how we talked a little bit about racism and how that there's this history in our country, and it's still around today, that people see lighter skin and tend to have more positive associations, or they might think that you're more trustworthy, or that they might think that you're a better student. And we know that none of that is necessarily true, but that is what people think. And so I had to talk to him a little bit about that. And you know, he didn't understand all of it, but we started our conversations because it was Tuesday and he asked me a hard question. And one of the vows that I made when I was a parent is that I wanted to answer my children as truthfully and as authentically as I can, as faithfully as I can. But I also want to present things to them in a way that they can understand, that's age appropriate, and that opens the door for further conversation. Because we know that he's not going to be able to understand everything at 6 years old. So we have to talk about it when he's 6 and when he's 7 and 8, 9, and 10 and 16 and 17 and 18 and, you know, probably 27 and 28 and 29. I hope too. I hope he still wants to talk to his mommy about these things. He probably still won't call me mommy then, but one can hope. The reason that we put this book together is because we know that the hard questions are coming. We never know exactly when the opportunity will present itself, either from a kid's question or from a situation that might happen. But we know that there are our children, even our young children, even our kindergartners and our first graders, our 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds are seeing a lot of hard things. We cannot protect them from some of the challenging conflicts that they're going to face, but we can support them and talk to them and help keep the conversation going. So we wrote this, edited this book, When Kids Ask Hard Questions, Faith-Filled Responses for Tough Topics. And I do wanted to present a little bit, this is not a webinar all about the book at all, but the book's coming out October 8th, which is just in a couple of weeks. If you order it now, you'll feel like it's in your hands any second. I have my copy. I'm so excited. I got it 2 days ago, so it's hot off the presses. And I know that I never like to buy a book until I know what's in it. I buy a lot of books, I don't know what's in them, but I would love to see a table of contents. It's my favorite thing, especially a book of essays. So I made this slide for all of you that just gives you an idea of what is in the book. So if there's a tough topic that you have a question about and you're wanting to know, is it going to be addressed in there, you can check it out. We divided it into sections. There is everything from, in the reflecting on bodies and souls section, there is some talk about building friendships with disabled peers. There is a great essay from Reverend Heidi Carrington Heath, which is about body image. There is an essay about addiction and mental illness. There's an essay on how to talk about suicide, which is, not a topic that we think that we want to address with a 6-year-old. And we might not need to, but chances are at some point in their young lives, our children are going to hear about it. We hope that it's not someone close to them, but we want to be prepared. And so we've got that. In the relationship section, there's a great, wonderful essay from Karen Heller and Margaret Webb, they're Quakers, so they're the Society of Friends, and they wrote a fantastic essay on being a friend and how to build friendships and how to support being a friend at all ages. We've got a great essay on divorce from Eliza Tweedy. Some essays on foster parenting and getting attached. We have a grief and loss section, which has some fantastic work in it. That's something that we always hear from kids, from parents, is how do we talk to kids about loss and death? And we've got great work in there from Kristen Cooper King. She's my sister. So she wrote something really lovely. Hazel Salazar Davidson also wrote a great essay on giving kids a voice in the wilderness. Rebecca and BJ Hutto wrote a fantastic essay on pregnancy loss. Because again, this is something that young children might hear about. Their parents or their family or their cousins, people that are close to them, maybe will lose a child during the pregnancy. So we have essays about that. Some fantastic work on fear and courage. Reverend Dr. Michael Waters wrote a great essay on engaging kids about racial discrimination, which I use some tips from when I talk to my little guy. His wife, Elise Waters, is a just powerhouse attorney, and she wrote an excellent essay on the adultification of Black girls and how that functions in our society to kind of help us with that. And again, I could go on and on and on. I feel like like I said, it's not going to be all about this. We go all the way to, we talk about faith. We have an essay from Danya Ruttenberg, who's a Jewish writer. She's a rabbi, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. So she's an author, and she wrote a great essay on how she raises her children in a minority religion. Aliyah Shimi wrote a fantastic essay. She's a Muslim author, and those are really great. And we also go all the way to money, and how do we deal with money, and how do we deal with income inequality, and how do we deal with teaching kids to be generous, and all of these great topics. So I think that this is a great book, and this is going to sit up here, and I think Debbie also is going to be able to email you all the table of contents. I sent them as images so that you can look at them if that's something that you want to know about. I did want to talk briefly, if I could go into one essay that I think in here that's particularly timely that I could go into in more detail. Because at the end of October, we've got Halloween coming up. And something that always comes up around Halloween is costumes and what costumes are appropriate for children, particularly around cultural appropriation. A few years back, there was a lot of, and even now, there's a lot of talk about a Moana costume and the Hawaiian culture, and is it honoring, or is it appropriating? Are we celebrating, or are we stealing culture? And it's so complicated. And the reason why I wanted to bring that topic up is the point of this book is actually not to tell you what's right and what's wrong, and not to tell you what you should say to your children. And so Yuki Schwartz, Dr. Yuki Schwartz, who wrote the essay on, it's called "Why Can't I Wear This Costume?" When she wrote this essay, she doesn't tell you, the hard and fast rules for, like, if your child is not culturally Hawaiian, they can never wear a Moana costume. That is not what she says in here. But she gives you great background on how cultural appropriation works, and how a lot of it comes from the way that the dominant culture might take a minority culture and steal their and monetize their work, their product, their culture, and really kind of make money off of it. So that's a really damaging part of cultural appropriation. And she also gives so she doesn't tell you whether you should tell your kid they can wear the costume or not, but she gives you some great things to think about so that you can make your own decision about, what works for your family, what you feel comfortable with, what your child what you feel comfortable with for your own child, and how, so that if your Aladdin is really big right now. So if your child happens to come up to you and really wants to dress up as Jasmine, and you don't happen to be Persian, then how you can think about that, and whether or not you are going to feel okay about that, or what you're going to tell them, and different things in that way. She gives every essay has not only scriptural backing and sociological backing, but they also have a practical crafting the conversation section. And so in this section, Yuki Schwartz talks about God's divine welcome, and how to help kids experience, not only be a part of welcoming others, but to experience being welcomed, and how to help them move into spaces where they are the guest, and where they can be welcome, and how they can both extend welcome and feel welcome, how to talk to them after these experiences, and help them develop their own language. And she gives great questions like, what did it feel like to be a guest? Was there something that I needed, or was there a welcome I needed that I didn't receive? What did I receive? And things like that can even a young child can start to learn how to think and talk about their experiences in that way. And so I just think, there also, every section has a further resources, so it gives you lots of great places to go to help you learn more about the particular question you have. And so Dr. Yuki Schwartz did a great job there as well. So there you go. So if you're wondering what to do about Halloween, there might be an answer right here. So I'm going to open this up for questions, and I'd be happy to answer questions about the book later on. If there's something if there's a I'm going to give just a second, but just so you know, the rest of our time, I'm going to move into talking about how we can be families that encourage, or people that encourage conversation with kids, how we can set ourselves up so that we can have conversations and continuing conversations. And then, we can take comments and questions and stuff more at the end. So I'll go ahead and talk about how we can be people that are creating a culture of conversation. And I titled this Beyond the Dinner Table. So much of what we think about and having conversations in a family, or at a church, or even at a lunch table, are around food. And we think a lot about the dinner table and we lament, oh, we can't have dinner together anymore. It's because of youth sports. It's because of, parents' work schedules. It's because of families that live in separate homes. It's because of all of these things and this breakdown of culture. And while, there is some truth to the struggles that families are experiencing now that are in some ways unique to our time and place, there are a ton of places and times and ways that we can talk with children and talk with one another that are not about just that one specific dinner table conversation. I can tell you, this is my father and my son Jake, who you might have seen his little face, and then that's my nephew Aaron. And so I think bedtime is a great time to talk. Kids are winding down, they're processing their day. It's a great moment to connect and to ask about, what are your, we talk about your thumbs up and your thumbs down in my house. And to try to hear a little bit more about what has happened and what might be on their minds. I know a lot of my hardest questions from my kids have come, when I'm laying in bed with them and I'm almost falling asleep and I've sung 1,000 songs, and then, then they'll drop a doozy in my lap. I'll be going, I wasn't prepared to answer that question. It's, it's already 20 minutes past your bedtime. But there's something about that moment that gets our brains and hearts and can be in a good space to talk. It can be quiet. It can have a sense of closeness that I think is really beautiful. And even I'll tell you, this picture that I've got up there, that's my dad. Those are his 2 6-year-old grandsons. One of whom at this point in time, this was in April, my nephew Aaron lived in Germany, and we lived in North Carolina, and my dad lives in Texas. So this is not something that they get to do very often. But because they have a relationship and they talk to one another a lot through FaceTime, and they have a sense of closeness and of reading together, that they can have close conversation. So this is, you can even have these good things even if you're not able to talk every single day. A lot of families talk about the car. We're music listeners in the car in the Jackson family. But I know that the car can be a place where a lot of people have good conversations, especially with school age kids that you're taking to school and dropping off. Something about having you're kind of locked in a space together. You can't get away, but you're also not staring at each other. You're looking forward, you're looking out the window. There's a little bit of disconnect, which can actually, take some of the pressure off and can sometimes help bring those conversations up. You also see a lot of things out of car windows that can bring up good conversation. So I know the car can be a good spot. Outdoors and family walks can also be a great spot. I think there's something about being, while just like I said, there's something about the physical location of the car where you're sort of enclosed and there's a sense of safety and security there. There can also be something about being outside where the heavens are high enough to hold even the biggest questions, right? So an evening walk, a morning walk, out sitting on the field after baseball practice. Sometimes these can be the times that we just talk to one another, and we can hear the real depth of question. I really do want to highlight the work with video chat. That's one of the reasons Jake is on. We're going to do a little video chat and show how we do it when my husband or I are traveling, or like tonight when I'm up at the church doing a webinar and he's at home with our friend Kay, who's babysitting him. And you can do this with grandparents, and you can do this with aunts and uncles. And I've never lived in the same, my kids have never lived in the same town as their grandparents or their aunts or uncles or cousins, but they're very close. They know one another, and they have even since they were babies, because they saw each other on FaceTime, on Skype, on Facebook Messenger, all the various platforms. They see each other and have a relationship, and Jake grabs the iPad and runs around and shows his Nana and Pop the things he put up in his room and the project he made. And so there's a sense that we can, of closeness, that can really happen with video chat. And my kids are too young to text, but I hear great things about text. And again, kind of like the car. And when I said there's a little bit of a disconnect that takes the pressure off, I think there's something about a text message that sometimes enables people to ask weightier or harder things. And so I wanted to open it up now and see if anybody has any questions. And this is sort of like comments, like, where do you talk? Where do you talk with your kids? What works well for you? So if you type that in your question and answer section, we can see them and we can read them. We can share them with one another.
Okay, and Karen, while we wait, I thought of a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle it if something has happened, some tragedy, or maybe you've lost a family member, and the kids shut down, and no matter what you say, they just, I don't want to talk.
Yeah. I think there's something very real about they get to choose when they talk. And so it's kind of like you can't force a kid to eat. You can't force a kid to talk. So something about taking off the pressure, I think, is good. And those are the moments when I look for ways to connect that are not talking, and so those are the moments that I'm looking for. With younger kids, let's go to the playground. Let's play on swings. Let's get the bikes out. Let's ride bikes. With older kids, it might be, you can go bowling or do art together. You can, a walk is always nice. You don't have to talk if you're taking a hike, but you can feel your feelings. And if you feel like there's something that you want to say, you can say it. I also think sharing a bit of our own vulnerability is also important. And so, in the example that you shared about a loss, to say, well, you don't, to say something like, this is how I feel. I feel really sad. And sometimes it breaks my heart. And sometimes my chest feels so tight that I can't breathe. And I cried last night, and I'm sure I'll cry again, but I want you to know that I'll always be here. I want you to know that I will, my love is with you, or, things like that, that when we can be vulnerable about how we're feeling, I think that can give permission. However, anger, betrayal, frustration, grief, for sure. So at least they know it's okay to feel those things. This grown up, whether they're my parent or my aunt or my Sunday school teacher, this grown up feels those things.
How do you feel about using a book? I'm thinking of some of the books about grief.
Oh, yeah.
For children.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, it's a great way to do it. And again, you're helping them you're giving them words for grief, and showing them some images, some descriptions, metaphors, different ways to think about it. At my church, we had a young woman died this week, and her nieces and nephews and young cousins are all going to be at her funeral on Saturday. And I am reading a book to them it's a Nancy Tillman book. It's called Wherever You Are, My Love Will Find You. And It's about how, my love is so high, it stretches itself. And it's about how you can never be too far away. There's really nothing that can separate you from my love, even if I'm not there to be with you. Um, and so that, that's an example of a way that we're trying to care for kids through a book. And there are fantastic ways you can find books on grief, kids' books on grief. You can, we do have some resources in the Kids Ask book, some lists, but you can ask your local librarian, your local pastor. You can Google it, and there are some great work has been done in that area.
I don't see any questions at the moment, so.
Okay. Nobody had any comments about other places they like to talk?
Oh,
I
maybe
know.
you've
I
covered them all.
want to hear about. I'm going to prod you, Debbie, because we pre-talked about this. You were going to tell us a little bit about maybe text conversations and how they have functioned for you.
Well, my children are grown now, and I have a daughter and a stepdaughter, and they, when they went off on their own or were at college, they would frequently, call us up and just weep on the phone about, some boy that they were with that broke up with them and all that. And however, my son did not like to do that. He prefers to, I guess, not actually make a phone call about that. So he would call me up and he would say, Mom, we're going to text now. So then I would have to go, I forget what it was. I think back in those days we used AIM, if
Oh,
anyone
I love
remembers
it.
that.
Hey, well now we just carry around AIM in our palm of our hand.
Right, right. Um, and we still text a lot, just about anything at all, or we share, silly cat pictures and things like that. So that's a great way that we communicate, and the car too. I know when we were talking before the webinar, and you were saying, where do you talk? And I immediately thought of the car, because that was where we had those conversations about, they used to call it the facts of life. And it was great because we didn't have to look at each other. And I knew they were as embarrassed as I was to talk about that. So the car worked really. And as you said too, they're a captive audience, because unless, you come to a stop, they can't really jump out. So.
Michelle is telling us that her 6-year-old likes to talk while playing with dolls and dress-up clothes. And I think I can really picture that. There's this sense of you're playing, you're imagining, you're engaging in a fun space with the grown-up that's there with you, your parent or another grown-up. And so you can bring up scenarios. You can put the dolls that are asking questions of each other, or just kind of free your heart and your mind a little bit to muse on what's important to you, or what you're having questions about. And so she also said that her child is kind of like trying the feelings, which I think is really beautiful, to kind of try out the feelings maybe with the doll, and with the imagination scenarios. And it's a great safe way to engage all of that. Beautiful. Play is fantastic.
I imagine drawing and painting too would be a good
Yeah.
way to talk about things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you're engaging in these things, the thing I think is so important, and the part that I think about text that's so interesting, is that we need these things to be there regularly. We can't just wait to bring them up, or or we can. If something happens and you don't have a pattern of talking with your child, you can always develop that. But it's harder to get, if you have a pattern of imaginative play and talking, or of drawing and talking, or of talking in the car, or taking walks and talking, or talking on the playground, or talking at bedtime. If you have these patterns set up, then it's so much easier for kids and adults to remain in conversation with one another. And I think that's something that I really want to support. And that's the essay that I wrote in the book, is all about how to be a family, or how to be, a group or an adult that is talking with children, that is able to have these conversations. And a lot of it is about having, it might be sharing cat memes with your, 8th grader. but but because they're used to connecting regularly, reaching out, then when they need to reach out about something that is a bigger, harder, deeper, more serious issue, that's a well-worn path. And whether it's a text path or whether it's an actual hiking trail, it's going to be a little bit easier if they've already done it before. So in that vein, I wanted to present, hold on. There we go. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about how to respond when you don't know. So when a kid asks a question and you don't really know how to respond to that question, you don't know what to say, or maybe you don't have time, or maybe you are not the parent, and so, or maybe you're not the only parent, you need to talk to your co-parent before you give an answer, or you need to talk to the parents or the grandparents or whoever it is before you can give an answer. So how do you, when a kid asks a hard question, how do you respond when you don't know, or when you can't really say, or when you need a little bit more time? One of the things, we say this all the time, but we can say, I don't know. That is an okay thing to tell a child, is that to say, I don't know. It's a hard thing to do in the moment, because when they drop something at you, you kind of want to say a lot of things, but it's okay to say, I don't know. It's often a great idea to go back and say, well, what do you think? Especially with younger kids, you might find that the question you think they're asking is not the question they were actually asking. I'm trying to think of a good example. Probably something like, you might think a kid, when they say, is that a boy or a girl? They point to a kid on a playground and they say, is that a boy or a girl? You might be thinking, oh my gosh, they're asking a question about gender identity and how do I deal with all this? And, you might find out that they just want to know, like, can boys have long hair? And you say, yeah. Okay. They move on. And that might be all the kind of response that they need in the moment. So, some turning it back on them, asking, what do you think, can often be a good idea. I always think it's okay to say, let's talk again later. And whether that's because you need more time, or like I said, you need to talk to someone else in the child's life before you can give an answer, or whether you're just, too tired, or schools, you're telling them to put on their backpack because they're the next car up in the drop-off line and they drop a doozy in your lap, and you say, we'll talk about that later. But ideally, I like to say, give a time. Say, let's talk about that at dinner tonight, or let's talk about that on Saturday. We'll have lunch and we'll talk about that. Or I need to talk to a couple people, but I'm going to get back to you at the end of the week. I know that sounds like a business meeting, but I think it can be reassuring to kids to know that you're thinking about it. And you need a little bit of time, that you will talk about it. I also think it's okay to say something like, I used to think, but now I know, or I used to think this, but now I think that. And this happens a lot around some of our evolving opinion, our social, the social life and the social progress that's being made in the United States is happening quickly. So it's possible that an opinion, again, I use the boys have long hair example. It could be, that that someone told your 6-year-old that he couldn't have long hair, but now he's 9 and you've decided, it's fine. You can grow your hair out, or I'm gonna let you wear pink sparkly shoes. I know I told you couldn't, but I used to worry that people would that would be hard for you, or that would be hurtful for you. But now I know that that's something that makes you happy, and I trust that it's going to be okay. And so yes, you can wear the thing. So I always think it's okay to change our minds. It's okay to have evolving opinions. It's okay to say, I used to think this, but now I've changed my opinion. And that opens up kids to know that they don't have to have all the answers. They don't have to get it all right. We do not have to get it right the first time. Even you might have said something, I might want to email all of you at the end of this and say, I said this thing in the webinar and it was just sort of popped out of my mouth. And then I rethought about it and I realized that's a terrible idea. I used to think, but now I know you shouldn't do that thing I said you should do. Because somebody brought it up and said, hey, that would be a terrible idea. Oh my goodness, yes, you're right. I used to think, but now I know. I used to think, but now I think. So when you don't know, that's okay. We're all learning. We're all in this together. We got to just keep being with one another and keep talking, keep the conversation going, The thing I wanted to bring up about, I was kind of talking about how to be a family that has a regular pattern of connecting and conversation. This is a format that I know that PRC has done webinars with Dr. Rich Melheim, who developed this Faith 5. What I love so much about Faith 5 is it is not rocket science. This is sort of like, you read this and you go, oh yeah, that's just like the basics of family life, or the basics of being friends with people. You talk about what's hard and what's wonderful. So you share your highs and lows. You read together, especially with kids. You are reading every day, 20 minutes of reading. You're reading those AR books. You're reading those guided reading books. You're reading. Or you can read a Bible verse or story as a part of that as well. I mean, it's part of your nightly routine. It's a part of being a grown-up and a kid, is reading together. You talk about the Bible and how it connects to your highs and lows. It doesn't always do that, but we can always kind of talk about the Bible and think about how it affects us, even if it doesn't directly, the particular story we read might not directly relate to our highs and lows. But if we get to talking about it and thinking about it, we can start developing those connections. Praying for one another's highs and lows, I think, is incredibly powerful, because what we're doing is we're giving children, we're not as adults doing all the praying. We are giving children the power to pray. They have the power to pray. They have just as much power to pray as an adult. We're honoring their words and their thoughts and their feelings. And we're also teaching them empathy and teaching them how to listen to other people and how to think about them and pray for them. These are the kind of skills that develop adults that are compassionate and that are loving and that are friendly and that are interested in community and that are spiritual and that are people of faith, is when they can develop this sense of compassion and empathy and vulnerability within their family at this very young age. And the last thing that's a part of the Faith 5 experience is the blessing, which is something that I'm going to show you a little bit of how we do that blessing when Jake, in about 10 minutes towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to show you how we do that at home, and then how we also do it remotely if we're in different places in the same town, or different places in the same city, or different places in the same country or around the world from each other, how we connect and do our blessing. But again, it's about empowering everyone in the circle. So whoever it is that's a part of the Faith 5, that's a part of this talking with one another, we all have the same power to give a blessing. It doesn't matter if you're 2 months old and you can't talk. You can take their little hand and kiss it and touch it to your forehead. And as an adult, to receive a blessing from somebody, from a child, especially someone you love or a child you love, is incredibly powerful. And we don't require that our kids bless, if we have friends that are spending the night or when our family's in town, we don't require that our kids, we say, do you have any blessings to give? But our kids very often do give blessings to everybody and that's with us. And it's incredibly powerful. I've taken my kids to nursing homes with me before and had them ask if they had blessings to give, and to see them, bless someone that they don't know very well, but they say, God loves you and so do I. It's really, it almost, it makes me weep right there is what it does. So all of this is the Faith Five. I love it. I think it's just really authentic. I think all of it is really powerful. It's well grounded in faith and in science and in family life, and it's completely and totally doable. I just feel like these are things that we do all the time as parents and as grandparents. This is even something that can be done, like I said, remotely via Skype or via FaceTime and all those things. This is part of how we engage with kids, and it builds strong families. And so, this is one option for a way to be a family that's talking about big things with one another, that's sharing the beautiful and the broken parts of our lives together. And it's being vulnerable, not just a couple times a year, although, a couple times a year is great. If that's what you get, that's what you get. And that can be really beautiful. But if we can the more often we can do this, the deeper we can go, and the stronger kind of the relationships that we can have. And they're going to be there when we need them to be there, because we know that we are going to experience brokenness and pain in our lives, and we know our kids are going to experience brokenness and pain. We can't protect them from that, but we can be there for them. And this is a great way to be a family that talks to one another. So questions. What questions do we have?
Okay, we have a quiet group, or they're probably taking it all in. I liked what you said about sometimes just saying, I don't know. And I work a lot with those in children's ministry, Sunday school teachers, and a lot of times they feel that in order to uh, work with children, they have to know all the answers. And I always tell them, just be honest. Another thing I like to do is on things that all people don't agree on, I like to say, well, I think this, but other people think that. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
that's good, or is that too hard for a child to figure out?
I think, well, it depends on their developmental level, right?
Mhm.
So it's a young child, like I said, Jake is 6. He doesn't really have a strong abstract thinking. But he can know that people have different opinions. A 6-year-old can know, I think this and that, I believe this, but other people believe that he can hold. And I'm not a child psychologist or a neuroscientist. I can't tell you if a 3-year-old can hold that or not. But what I can tell you, that a 3-year-old's going to, if they're asking you the question, they want to know what you think. It's important to them to know what you think. So.
Could you speak a little bit about questions kids have about God and the Bible? And of course, they reach a certain age where they stop accepting what they're told, and they say things like, well, how do you know the Bible's true? Or how do you know that God exists?
Mm-hmm.
How would you
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about that?
It's a really important part of growing up and being someone who thinks and believes, is to start and question and wonder. I mean, I think if they're asking us, if they're saying to you, how do you know? Then they want to know. They want to know how you know that that God exists. And it could be that your answer is a little bit more abstract than they're able to grasp. Um, but as kids get into that kind of like really questioning stage in the that preteen teen time, then they really can hold, you know, of course, really complex ideas, really complex thoughts. And when we start, you know, opening up the Bible and faith to um, a variety of thoughts. I laugh. I'm new at a church, and I am doing a sermon on Sunday. It's called All About Eve, and it's a monologue from the point of view of Eve. And in my writing it, I was thinking, you know, everything that I could say as Eve, I believe completely, and probably like a lot of it, if you take it to, you know, its literal meaning, and that's what I'm saying, so why not take it literally, is heretical, you know, is wrong. If you know, kind of, if you push the boundaries of it, or you know, if you take it 3 steps further, then it can create problems. um, and um, and I can, as a, you know, as an adult, as a grown up, and as someone with a maturing faith, a mature faith, or even people with maturing faith, you know, they can learn to hold that, like, well, you know, you can kind of sometimes believe things that seem to contradict one another. Um, and you know, as soon as you start speaking as a monologue from a biblical character, you're going to say something that's probably a little um, just strange, or hard to hear, or potentially problematic, right? And then you go, oh yeah, that is potentially problematic. I do agree that is potentially problematic, but I also believe that is true. So um, that's kind of the nature of faith, and it's actually beautiful. What we love about faith is that it's strong enough to hold a lot of diverse, hard, difficult things. God is not going to um, be so rigid that it's going to break as soon as we start pushing on it. You know, God and our faith, and our, hopefully our faith communities as well, can be places where we can, you know, push and engage and think and stretch and make a mistake and say, oh gosh, I used to think that, but now I think this, or I said that, but you know, I actually meant to say this. And we can be people that are um, thoughtful and forgiving of one another. So with young kids, I guess your question was ultimately with young kids. I think if they're asking you, they want to know what you think. And if you need some time to think through what you want to say in the best possible way for them, it's okay to say, you know, let me come back. Give me a minute, or give me a couple of days. I'm going to come back to you with that. Because sometimes that can be a really great thing.
I see a question from Dana. Do you want me to read that, or do you want to read it?
Yeah, Dana says, how do we talk about difficult topics with teens? Little kids are more open usually to talk and share and ask questions. Teens keep it all in most of the time. I do think that is something that we see, and we experience. There is those teen years are a point when um, your feelings are very intense. The things you see are very intense, and still we know that prefrontal cortex is not completely developed. So all of the ways to regulate and to consider are just not. All of the judgment making skills and stuff are just not quite as advanced as we hope that they will be someday. I mean, even into like 25, I think it takes to like almost 25. Again, I'm not a neuroscience, but it takes into our 20s before we really get that brain kind of completely functioning in all the ways that it can. And so I think it can be hard, and teens do keep it in a lot. What I think Debbie's point about texting is really well made. That sometimes just that disconnect of I'm going to text you this question as opposed to just ask you outright, or make you look me in the eye and talk to me. But if I send you something, text, if text is a way we communicate a lot, we can text back and forth. That's a great way for a parent and child to communicate. I will note texting is probably about tough topics is maybe not always the best way for a non-parent, a non-adult, a non-parent adult and a child to communicate, because we do want to make sure that parents are always aware of the kind of conversations that we're having with kids, that we're doing those in an open way. But I think when we can set up, um, texting, I've heard of people doing journals where they write to one another. It's kind of like long form texting, but I've heard of that as well, where they pass a journal back and forth, and they feel like they can write to one another. I do know of a woman that is a part of, that I know from some of my work with Faith Five and the cross-gen leadership movement. Her teenage and young adult sons, they started doing this Faith Five practice when they were in high school, and because of this work that they did together as a family, they had a relationship that when these young men have gone through some really tough times, they felt like they could come to her because they had come to her so many times. So it's like I said, it's that well-worn path. And if she was on, I don't want to share too much of someone else's story, but I do know that that's something that people that have been a part of this and have done this with adult or older kids, teens, and have even started it when they were teens and in college even, and were able to develop a relationship using it. Or not develop a relationship. Of course, you already have a relationship with your children. There's a connection. There's a love there. There's a depth. There's hopefully a sense of trust. But to practice the conversations, practice the talking, so that you can talk to one another.
When you mentioned the possibility of writing in a journal, it reminded me one of my daughter's teachers had the parents kind of get involved in books that the kids were reading. And each week she would ask a question about the book, and my daughter would answer it, and then I would tell her what I thought. And not everybody likes to use a journal, but I think the more time you spend with your children, especially as they get older, there's so many opportunities to talk about TV programs you're watching or movies, or believe it or not, my daughter is 31 and we still read books and talk about them together.
I love that. I love that. And I love that this is something that I know a lot of schools are working with as well, trying to make sure that the parents are, part of, the reading conversations that they're having about school books. One of the things I love a lot about Faith Five, and I actually recommend it for families that are interfaith families, or even some families that, one parent is maybe one parent is Christian and the other is not, because it's a non-judgmental way, and the scripture that you read, the Bible story that you read, doesn't have to be it can be from the faith tradition of someone else, of a different parent, or it can be if you have a parent that's more of a humanist, there's some beautiful poetry out there that can get to empathy and things like that, and that's important. And you can honor like all the feelings and all the beliefs that is around, that make up your family. I've got Jake on, so before we close our time together, I want you to know that I gave you a resource list, or you'll get a resource list.
She mentioned your name.
And so
I
you'll get
just
that.
unmuted Jake just to
So,
let him know.
yep, so Jakey is unmuted. So you all are going to get a resource list that it gives you some of my favorite books on parenting and faithful parenting. It also gives you some great online resources, including couple of Facebook groups that are fantastic. And it also links to my favorite story Bible, a couple of my favorite story Bibles, Growing in God's Love, a story Bible, Elizabeth Caldwell and Carol Wareheim, amazing, amazing. Deep Blue Kids Storybook Bible is also great. And those are great for people of all ages. I think if you're an adult, you will love both of those storybook Bibles, and you should get them, and you will love reading them. And you could read them as part of your family faith by practice with your adult children. You would still love it. I've got Jake, and I want to, Jakey has agreed to show how we do our blessings at night as a family when we can't be in the same room with one another. Can you say hi, Jakey? Can you say hi?
Oh, okay. You might ask, why was I in the hammock? Is that because we have a hammock and we took it down
Now she needs to talk about blessings,
It's okay. It's okay. There was a picture of him in the hammock at the beginning of the webinar.
Yeah, and the picture we have right now, you might wonder why Grace looks like a painting mommy's face. Probably because he was younger and that stuff.
Yes, Grace is giving me a blessing in this picture. Can you give me a blessing? Do you want me to give you a blessing first, or do you want to give me a blessing first?
I will give you a blessing first.
Okay, I'm ready.
I love you. So do I. That's what I love you, Mama God.
Oh, thank you, Jakey. Are you ready for your blessing? Okay. God loves you. Mwah. And so do I. Mwah. Right. Rest well, beloved Jake of God.
Oh, and also, I bet Mom is wearing headphones so she can hear what I am saying.
That's right.
That's right. It helps the microphone a little bit when I wear the headphones. It just makes the sound a little clearer. I love you, honey. Thank you for sharing blessings with us. This is how we do these blessings, even when we're far away. And we've even recorded them when we couldn't even be live with one another. So we always have our connection where we love each other and we give each other the beloved child of God. All right. It's been my pleasure to be with all of you tonight as a part of this webinar. You have my contact information as well on the resource list that you will receive. You have this PowerPoint presentation that you can look through if you wish. And I wish you all of the love and all of the blessings as you answer hard questions and tackle tough topics with the kids that are in your life.
And thank you, Karen. I'm looking forward to seeing the book when it comes out. And I also want to thank Jake because he is now officially our youngest panelist in our webinars. So I'll just say bless everyone and good night.